act with each other. This sort of event gives people a really great grasp of that dynamic. The Institute arranges these events because it's really important these days for anyone operating at board level to have a really good grasp of the management of risk.
It does appear that managers don't seem to manage risk. They don't seem to understand it. And I think that really is the danger for our organisations.
Looking at the next 10 years or so, if you like, what's called the crisis in capitalism now is effectively a loss of faith in numbers-driven systems because they don't embrace anything like enough of what corporates are doing to maintain public trust.
Financial services has been driven by a bunch of models that were fundamentally flawed and where nobody was doing, as I would describe, piercing the perfect place arrogance through a disruptive intelligence, which is what risk management needs to become.
The IRM has been building its risk community and is proud to work across all levels and sectors. Our membership is at its highest level and our demand for courses is continuing to grow. I would at this point like to thank our sponsors for this event: Active Risk, RSM, Tennant, QBE and DNV. As a not-for-profit organisation, we take all of our surplus and plough it straight back into developing our education products and solutions.
Issue around risk tolerance and appetite is just adding another layer of complexity. How do you sell that in a context whereby risk management is seen as a compliance exercise and you try to move from that to a kind of a forward-thinking paradigm?
The next steps that you might consider taking with the board is simply to ask them, after they've examined the risks that might be ahead of them, how much risk is too much risk? Because that, to an extent, is helping them to define their risk appetite and perhaps their risk tolerance, depending upon the nature of the risk.
To me, it's the risk appetite is pretty much a yardstick. I mean, coming up with a risk report and saying your exposure is this much or that much doesn't make much sense to a board or a management team unless they know compared to what.
If on the upside of risk, should we actually have an appetite for risk at all? Shouldn't we gather all that we can? Should we never hold ourselves back? But the answer is, of course, is that there has to be a realistic limitation, because if you take too much upside risk, chances are something could go wrong.
You must stop thinking of business as being mechanical and being a machine that behaves in a predictable way. Businesses are a collection of people, of human beings, and that makes them biological.
Why has so much kicked off in terms of social unrest and in terms of the deeper causes of social unrest? I think the relevance of this to a corporate audience is not, I think please don't put it in that compartment that says, oh, we've got some risks in terms of CSR or maybe even protest. The relevance of it, I think, will become clear, is much more core to the way business models are changing and the way that for you as a professional group, risk factors are emerging. That is, I think there's something much more generic we can learn from answering the question why so much social unrest kicked off into 2011.
If I think you are an awkward sod who's just coming along to the meeting and you know, just being difficult for the sake of being difficult, I'm not going to listen to a word you say. I'll just blank it. So the being trusted as being willing and helpful and saying something useful, I learnt this in forecasting long ago, incidentally. There's no point producing the forecast for what you actually think will happen if nobody's going to believe it. You might as well just shut up. So if you think things are going to be better next year than this year, don't make too big a gap.
I think this kind of event from the IRM is really valuable because it allows you to really take a step back, take that day out of the office and really think about what you can do differently, what kind of questions you can ask the board, what you can ask the business areas, and really building on some of the sessions that we had in terms of just enhancing my own knowledge of some of the risk areas across the world.
I believe this kind of event from IRM is valuable because I think as a head of risk management, or as a risk leader, it can be quite lonely sometimes because you're a technical specialist. You're usually, if not the only one, the most senior one in your organisation. And I think this is a fabulous opportunity, really just to step back from the detail, from the day-to-day job, from what we're doing every day, the challenges we're facing, and talking to other people and learning from them and actually feeling that you're not alone out there.
Without any doubt, the global risk profile is on its way up, and I think that taking that type of conversation to the board and making them aware of how the world is changing so that they have better context for making the decisions that they have to make, I think is an absolute must, and I think certainly I'll be taking some of that away to try and push to my colleagues.